We're now live.
Thank you, Agnes. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting of Planning Committee South. I'm Councillor Seamus Bennett, Chair of the committee, and my Vice Chair is Councillor John Fisher. The Planning Committee carries out the duties and powers of East Southwark Council as the local planning authority for the district, in line with both planning legislation and the Council's constitution. There's no fire alarm test scheduled today, so if the fire alarm sounds, follow the green exit signs to the nearest available exit and do not use the lift. Please go to the fire entrance to Raduna Park in front of the concrete structure. Do not re-enter the building until informed to do so by the evacuation coordinator or the fire service. Could I ask that everyone present ensure mobile phones are switched to silent or switched off, and will all those present keep their microphones muted until called to speak? Ask those in the room to make sure their microphones are positioned close enough to register your voice and to switch them off when you finish speaking. If members need to leave the room for a comfort break, you must ask the chair to adjourn the meeting, otherwise you won't be able to continue participating in the debate or vote on that item. As I will be speaking as ward member on item 6, for that item today, Councillor John Fisher will be acting as chair for item 6. And those in the public gallery, whilst you're seated in the gallery, you're there to observe, and there should be no clapping, calling out, etc. during the meeting. In the unlikely event of any exclusion of the public, the meeting will continue to be live streamed, so would remain open to the public even if all or some members of the public are excluded from the meeting room itself. I'd now like to ask the officers present and online to introduce themselves, starting with you, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members and members of the public joining us in the room and online. Joe Blackmore, Planning Manager, presenting item 1 on behalf of the case officer today and supporting my colleague Grant Hill with his application. Just before I hand over to other introductions, just a couple of points of housekeeping. You received your early notification on items that are expected to be on the agenda today. One of those applications was in respect of a care village facility on land off Yarmouth Road at Melton. We decided to defer the application to the next meeting. No particular issues really with that. The reason we've done so is that this will be an application that presents for the first time an Anglian Water position around infrastructure capacity and how a planning proposal relates to that. We've had lots of correspondence with Anglian Water in respect of capacity within their network and their acceptance or otherwise of development proposals. So what you'll have within that application is a report that grapples with that issue, and what we'd like to do is make sure that in advance of that we've had some time to brief you on the wider context of the Anglian Water position and situation. We'd also probably get some further legal review of our committee report to enable that to be sound before it's presented to you, and a further reason for the deferral is that the head of planning and building control, Ben Warner, can't make this meeting today, but will be in attendance in July. A second housekeeping point, just before I hand over to colleagues, is in respect of a upcoming application that this committee will be looking at for a 20 megawatt output solar farm on land south of Eastern Lane on the Glevering estate near Wickham Market. And that's an application where we will be advising, and it's been agreed through the referral panel, that a site visit takes place in advance of that application being considered. So if I could ask for members to stick around after the meeting concludes and once we're offline, and hopefully we can agree a date in the diary between us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. Grant.
Good afternoon, members. I'm Grant Hill, Senior Planning Officer for East Suffolk Council. I'll be presenting item 2 this afternoon.
Pip Alder, Democratic Services Officer, and I'm joined by my colleague Agnes Ogundiran. And online we have
Dominic Starkey, Assistant Enforcement Officer, to provide a update on the
You're very
enforcement
quiet,
report.
Dominic.
Oh, can you hear me better now?
No, it's
Ah,
like your microphone is muffled or something. Might be this end. Hold
I
on.
will. I'll try and plug in some headphones for the update report, so I'm able to provide that
we
clearer.
can't really hear you. Try again, Dom.
Can you hear me better now?
Not really.
I've got some headphones. I'll pop them in when I provide my update on the report.
You've got some headphones you can get in a minute or two, yeah? Okay. So that's Dominic Starkey doing enforcement in a minute. Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 1 is apologies and substitutions.
There have been no apologies and no substitutions.
Thank you, members, for all being here today. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. If members have an interest, could they please clarify if it is a disclosable pecuniary interest, other registrable interest, or non-registrable interest, and the details of what they may be. Councillor Smithson.
I don't know whether it's relevant. I am a member of the Felixstowe Society, but I've had no discussions or anything about this. It's just that they're one of the objectors.
Any other? No, and as I've said, as I'm speaking as ward member, I won't be sharing item 6 on that particular item. No other declarations? Okay, so declarations to lobbying's item 3. If members have been lobbied, could they please clarify if they've been lobbied, and if not, state that they've made no response to those representations. Again, no. Thank you very much, members. Item 4 is minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of May. Does anyone have any comments or corrections regarding those minutes? No. So I have a proposer to adopt those, Councillor Hedgley, seconded Councillor Nimmy, and all those in favour. Thank you, that's unanimous. In the back. So item 5 is the enforcement action update. Dominic, could you try now?
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me better now.
Not really.
Okay, I'm not sure as to why. Can
Well,
you hear me
I
enough
can hear
to...
you, but it's extremely faint. I don't know if you've got any volume.
Should be on maximum output.
Hold on a second.
Can you try speaking again, Dominic, for us?
Yeah, are you able to hear me better now?
Yes, we are.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chair. There is 4 updates on the enforcement report. A.6, the old post office Sandy Lane in Waldronfield. A compliance site visit has been completed and the fence remains in place. So the next steps of enforcement action are currently being reviewed. A.7, 7 Main Road, Westerfield, an appeal has been submitted regarding that case. So we will now have to await the outcome from the planning inspector with regards to that appeal. B2, the Animal Welfare Centre, 333 High Street in Walton. The appeal has now been heard for that, and the appeal was upheld and the enforcement notice quashed. However, that has had appropriate conditions added by the planning inspectorate. So that's still a positive outcome in terms of enforcement. B.5, the old golf shop, Newbourne Road in Waldringfield. The appeal, was dismissed and the enforcement notice upheld. So the compliance period will now go live again, pending enforcement action. Just with a note on B5 though, there is also a live live planning application for the use, which will also need to be determined as well.
Thank you, Dominic. Yeah, thanks for giving us those sort of highlights of the report. I think that's something that we talked about before, so that's appreciated. Do any members have any questions? Yeah, Councillor Nimmy.
Yes, Dominic. B5, they lost the appeal, did you say? And are we looking for it to revert back to being a golf shop, or are they putting in an application? Where are we actually on?
So B5, the appeal was dismissed, so the enforcement notice is still in place. So the compliance period will now commence again. However, there was already a planning application pending determination. However, because of the appeal process going through on the enforcement notice, the officer was awaiting the outcome of that appeal. So that planning decision will now be issued, and depending on the outcome of that planning decision will be what action is required from an enforcement perspective.
Thank you.
Councillor Hedgley.
Just to say, I'd like to thank Dominic for his help and professionalism in a recent case in my ward, and he did a good job.
Thank you. No other questions?
Yeah.
Councillor Reeves.
Could you give an update on F1? Because it's 2019 was the last report we had, which basically said it was with legal to make an assessment. So 6 years, that's for a long time.
As that's not in my area, I would need to speak to the officers to see exactly where we are at with that. The last update I did receive though is that it was still with the legal team with regards to recovering costs. My understanding is that I believe that with regards to the enforcement action, compliance has been achieved, and it is purely the legal process that is still going through on that one.
I think for you, Chair, just to confirm on that point, the unauthorised development has been resolved. There's no longer an issue on site. It's just all of, as you can appreciate from the timeline, significant cost to the council in pursuing that over the years, and then it's that wrangling through the courts in terms of trying to recover that cost as best we can. So it's probably something that will remain on your update paper for quite some time to come, but you can be reassured that the actual breach of planning control and the development that was not authorised has been remedied in that sense.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, in that case, no further questions. I have a proposer to accept the enforcement report. Councillor Daly and Councillor Reeves seconding. And can we vote on that, please? In favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. So for item 6, I'm going to step into the public gallery, and Councillor Fisher is going to come up here to chair this item.
Right. Thank you, Seamus. The first step was to invite the officer to present the application, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application being dealt with by my colleague Emma Devereux that I'm presenting today on her behalf. She's unwell and unable to present. This is an application for a new front boundary wall and gates, 39 High Road East. It follows on from a previous application, a 25 reference that you see on the slide there that was withdrawn following officer feedback. The application has been brought to the planning committee through the planning referral process because the officer recommendation to grant permission is contrary to the recommendation of refusal from the town council. Those comments are in full within your report, but I think it's fair to say that they raise genuine material planning considerations and concerns when assessed against two particular policies, SCLP 11.1 and SCLP 11.2. So worth having those policies to hand, at least for the debate portion of this item. In terms of the site location, on the left-hand side, the site is edged in red. The property adjacent to the old hall is a listed building, and then you have a run of detached properties along this side of High Road East. There's a pleasant character to the area, being suburban in its way. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this part of the town. Existing block plan on the left-hand side shows where the drop curb position is here, and the site area is relatively large in terms of the depth of the rear garden in particular, and there is quite significant room to the frontage of the property. The proposal shows at a very high level here the point of vehicular access and the boundary wall and gates, but I'll show that in some more detail in upcoming slides. Some photographs now of the site and its context. So this is a view of the existing access, left-hand side of the screen, and the boundary hedge at the front with the telegraph pole. And I believe the shrub to the right of that hedge marks the boundary with the neighbour, and the garage at the front there is semi-detached, shared between two properties. So the view of the boundary hedge and the telegraph pole adjacent, showing the cycle path and pavement and road in a westerly direction. And there's that westerly view again, showing the boundary hedge and gravel hard standing to the front property, and then the old hall farther along to the west. Flipping around, a view to the east is showing the access and the gravel driveway, garage and the boundary hedge. And then if you were essentially standing at the front boundary of the site, looking southwest towards properties the other side of the road, and I think you start to get that feel then for that pleasant suburban character that I referenced. Looking towards the southeast, scale of property changes somewhat in this location here, with a couple of bungalows around the road junction. And there is a bit of a mix of property types in the area, both in terms of height, scale, form, the era in which they were built, but probably what's consistent is in terms of site coverage, footprints all being quite proportionate, well spaced out, and a good building line along the road. This is the view from the other side of the road, looking back towards the existing access and gateway to the old hall on the western side of number 39. So this is the proposed site entrance plan. The vehicle access point here with the gate set back 5 meters into the site. That's a Highways Authority requirement that those gates have to be set back 5 meters from the edge of the highway. And then you've got the wall that runs along the frontage, turns into the site, and then on this side of the vehicle access, and pretty much all of it aside from the piers, is directed and angled in towards the site. Proposed entrance elevation to the south, so this is what you would be presented with facing onto High Road East. You've got a red facing brickwork wall, piers at 1.8 meters in height maximum, and then these slatted panels in between brick piers, which drop down to slightly lower within the middle sections at just under 1.6 meters in height. And then the gates that you see here are black powder coated. Appreciate this drawing flattens that perspective somewhat, but so those would be set back that 5 meters into the site. But generally speaking, this is how that would present. And the piers have got stone caps and coping to the wall. On the left-hand side is the west elevation of how that would present as if you were looking towards the garaging. But I think probably what's more important here is the applicant has provided example railings and gates of how these would look when the development was implemented, if permission was granted. So in terms of the gates at the top here, with chunkier slats that are about equivalent to the spaces in between those slats, and then the railings within the wall much thinner in profile with larger gaps through. I should say those are just a representation of other sites and how that could look.
Apologies, Chairman. If I can continue, Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. So we'll move on now to some photographs of the wider street scene. You've got the application property on the right-hand side of your slide here, and in either the bottom left or right of each photograph, you get some perspective of how this relates to the site. We've also included here some wider context. So you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a few sites that have been marked out where there's different kinds of boundary treatment, particularly on that frontage. If I point to number 30 in particular, that's got a scheme approved, which is shown at the top here, and that's been constructed and currently under consideration in terms of a new proposal to amend that, as shown in this location here. And then you've also got some examples of brick walls with railings. I mean, these are clearly different to the proposal itself. I think these have just been included to show some of the wider context. And then that really moves on to, in a similar way, to show a mix of boundary treatments in the wider area. Some of those are low timber fencing with hedging set atop or behind. You've got some low brick walls and generally a mix of boundary treatments within the wider area. A more sort of decorative timber fencing along the frontage there, pretty traditional close border timber fence that's weathered and softened quite considerably. Top left. On the right hand side here, where you see more historic walls like this, I think those are less of a justification for the proposal and more of an example of quite attractive high quality boundary treatments. So these aren't really shown to say that necessarily all of these examples evidence that the proposal is of the highest quality design compared to all of these. It just gives you that wider context, that the important point is probably that it's not uniform within that wider area. So in terms of the key considerations that are set out in your report, the principle of development is not up for consideration. It's really about the detail of the development. In highway safety terms, there's no objection from the Highways Authority, particularly as there's sufficient off-street parking, which complies with policy. The critical issue and what's come out of the town council comments is in respect of the design and appearance of the development and amenity impact, and that relates to policies SCLP 11.1 and 11.2. The planning officer recommendation is that the scheme on balance is judged to accord with those policies, and we are therefore recommending approval of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. I'd now like to invite
You can ask if there's any points of clarification on the presentation.
right. So are there any points of clarification on the presentation then? Councillor Day.
Yeah, it's interesting that this has come before committee twice and been withdrawn, and now we presented. What has changed since the last one to make this one acceptable now, from your point of view? What's the significant change that makes it acceptable now as it wasn't before?
I think the changes are relatively minor from my review of things, and it's really quite an unbalanced decision here in my view, because I think there's been that wider appreciation from officers of the local context and lots of other boundary treatments and what the designs are, and the applicants come back with a tweaked scheme that they feel is acceptable in context. And probably some useful context for you is that we've had we've probably always maintained quite a strong position as a local planning authority on boundary treatments, and where we feel they're a bit harsh or austere, maybe a softer approach is more desirable. We've resisted those, and we've not always been that successful on appeal, we've found, particularly outside of conservation areas, as you have in this case, albeit there is a listed building next door, and that is a relevant consideration. So there's not necessarily huge changes here that come about with this revised scheme. It's tweaks, and I think the officer judgment is an unbalanced one in context, and to see if members agree with that recommendation.
Any other, Councillor Smith?
Can you just confirm it's partial hedging that's going, which is only the front, and the side hedging, which separates the boundary with the older house next door, is not being affected? That's one. I mean, I've seen the house, I've gone there, so there's a long hedge which goes on the left of the building as you look at it. So presumably there's only a bit of hedging in the front anyway.
Yes, so you've got. Yeah, so you would lose the section of hedgerow at the front here, and then because the wall angles in towards the site, the hedging would then remain on the longer boundary with the old hall to the west.
Thank you. Yeah. Any other points? Councillor Reeves.
Just clarification, highways gave approval because it was moved back 5 metres. Yeah. Does that mean that when they're going out, they have to get out their car, close the gates, or are they automatic behind them? Or do we know that? Oh, sorry.
So it's possible that they wouldn't have to be electric vehicle gates that could be opened in advance, sort of as you were pulling up from down the road. So yeah, there is potentially a scenario where a car would pull up and for a moment would be blocking the footway. It would be off the highway and the bike lane, but it would be temporarily blocking the pavement whilst they open the gate.
Any other points of clarification? Mr. Rains? In that case, can we go on to public speaking then and ask Councillor Stuart Bird and Felix Stowe Town Council to present? And you have 3 minutes. Yes, when you're ready.
Members, Felixstowe Town Council is opposed to this application, and we've remained of that view for each of the 3 iterations of the proposal. Our objection is based on the fundamental point that it will be jarring and visually intrusive and also incongruous to the street scene. The scheme introduces a solid frontage where currently it is open. The majority of the neighbouring properties have either open entrances with hedging or where there are walls at a low level. The officer's report at paragraph 8.7 actually admits that this proposal is, quote, out of context when compared to the existing hedge. I will draw your attention to the local plan policies, which both underpin and support our recommendation for refusal. 11.1, paragraph B, quote, understand the character of the built, historic and natural environment and use this understanding to complement the local character. 11.1C3, quote, the height and massing of development should be related to that of their surroundings. And C4, quote, there should be a clear relationship between buildings and spaces in the wider street scene. I would argue that this application, introducing a harsh, solid physical barrier, albeit now with some gaps in it, is contrary to these policies. In addition to the physical appearance, our objection is also based on the conceptual change involved, an alteration of the physical narrative where the buildings on a road contribute to the street scene. This is articulated in paragraph C4 of 11.1 quoted above, the relationship between buildings and the street scene. This proposal breaks that link, shutting the dwelling away from public view behind a physical barrier. Lastly, the officer in support of the application quotes policy 7.2 on parking standards. To me, this is not relevant. This proposal doesn't affect the off-street parking, so therefore the policy can't be used to defend the proposal. You can't quote irrelevant policies in support of a planning application. So for all of the reasons above, I would ask you to reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Do any of the committee have questions for Councillor Bird? Councillor Hedgley.
Thank you for that. Are there, to your knowledge, any other dwellings in that road that have similar frontages of brick and metal gates?
I suppose it depends on how far away you want to go. As far as we know, in the immediate vicinity, there's nothing like that. The officer did quote, I think it's at number 30 on the other side, but that's got very open railings on a low parapet wall, and the proposed gates are open railings. This one, obviously, we accept that there has been some modification. This from the first iteration was a solid fence and solid gate. These are these gaps, but viewed from the road or the opposite side of the road, it's still going to look a solid structure. If you go up to it, you'll obviously be able to peer through these gaps in the railings and still see the garden, the road, but set back, it's still going to look a solid. And as far as we know, in the immediate vicinity, yes, there's some low fences, there's some low walls. I'm not saying that there's a uniform frontage, but in the immediate vicinity, I don't think there's anyone who's got something as so jarring and as solid as this one. No.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Deaton.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Can I just ask, did the Town Council's Planning Committee make any reference to the old wall and the impact it would have on that?
Well, I mean, obviously, I quoted the policies under policy 11.1, which deal with design, but in our original recommendation, we do also quote 11.2 paragraph E, and that's the amenity. So it's the relationship with the surroundings and other physical properties. And yes, it's a judgment call, but yes, you could argue that something as harsh and modern as that does that blend well with a listed building. Although in fairness, that listed building has got a brick wall at the front of its frontage, but that's been there a long time in situ. It's not, this is a change. That's the point. There was that brick wall was probably for that listed building was there before most of the neighbouring properties were even built at all. Our point is that this is a significant change. As you walk or drive down that road, you're suddenly going to be presented with, at the moment, an open boundary, open drive and a hedge. You're now going to see a solid mass of structure, of metal, of brick. But yes, I would argue that you could argue perhaps it doesn't just detract, but it certainly doesn't enhance the appearance of the adjoining listed building. No.
Thank you.
Have we any further questions? Doesn't look like it. Thank you, Stuart. So now I'd like to ask the ward member to speak, and you have 5 minutes, please.
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Just speaking here, just say a few words. I haven't got too much more to say in addition to what Councillor Bird has said, but I do live on the same road, about probably 300 metres from this property, so I know it well. I know the road very well. And as Councillor Bird has just said, I do feel that this would represent a very significant change to the street scene, and introduce what you could call a gated community type element to a place that doesn't need that, has never had that kind of feel to it. A very different outlook, and I believe that at some point security. Right, note to self, when we mention the mobile phones next time, I'll actually go around. Easily done, easily done. Yeah, so in terms of security, it's in a way difficult to imagine. We can't be complacent. Things can happen, but these postcodes in this area are among the safest that you could live in. So any idea that there's a genuine security justification is pretty difficult to support. There are historic frontages there, or much softer frontages along High Road East, including the listed building next door. The one that the quite high brick wall that was shown is part of the old farm, which is actually very close to where I live, and a solid, quite stark frontage like this with gates, I think would be really out of keeping, out of the current street scene, and detract from the general view, which is quite an important one coming into the town and down to Old Felixstowe, which a lot of people pass through. Another aspect is how busy that road is in terms of safety. That stretch is particularly busy for cars, but also cycles and pedestrians. Pedestrians use it a lot coming in and out of town, and the presence of gates with cars going in and out, possibly having to stop en route, and I think the visibility is, I think, slightly dubious with those solid structures. So I have concerns also on the visibility coming in and out, and the disruption to walking and cycling traffic, as well as potential slight safety risk coming in and out. So yeah, I wouldn't support this application, and those are my views. I think that it's incongruous, and actually quite specifically, I won't go into the details, but 11.1C, 11.C3, C4, and 11.2E, those were the policies that I felt it most specifically relationship to other properties, heightened massing in relation to surroundings, and relationship with the wider street scene. But on specific grounds, I felt that those were the most obvious ones that it contravenes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. I'd like to ask the officer to make any clarifications if you have them.
Questions? Questions?
No, questions. Oh, right, sorry. Questions of Seamus. Councillor Smith. Yeah. Seamus, your mic.
The house itself is a modern house. So, and there's only a tiny bit of hedge in the front currently. So I can't see that the fencing is out of character with that modern house particularly. And there is such a range of fencing down that road, really. I don't go down thinking, oh my goodness, that would detract from my street view. I don't even think I'd notice it, if I'm honest. That's just from a passerby. If they want the inconvenience of having to get in and out of a car every 5 minutes to get in and out their drive, I guess that's their problem. I personally wouldn't choose to do that, and I'm a bit baffled why anyone would want to, but anyway, that's my view, really. I don't know whether you... Is it a question? Yeah, it does. Is it really out of character with that modern house?
No, I don't think it's out of character with the house itself, but I do think that it's jarring and out of character with the overall view going down High Road East, which are open frontages. The closest to go back to Councillor Hedgley's question, I think, about similar properties, as Councillor Bird mentioned, number 30 does have quite a new kind of gated. It's not actually. It's not. It does have gates, but I don't think they've got permission for those gates, and they may have to be changed potentially. But that's very open with a low wall and just iron poles. So there's much more ability to see through than there is closed. Whereas this one is different with its horizontal bars and slats. It really is quite different, and having a gated frontage like that, I don't think it's got a separate pedestrian access. No, Yeah, it is really different. I'm generally not so aware of all the street scene side of things, but this one does to me feel a bit extreme for the area that it's in.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, seems not. So, thank you, Councillor Bennett. So now I'd like to ask the officer to make the clarifications.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points, picking up on Town Councillor Bird's comments around policy SCLP 7.2. I think as a point of clarification, it's not to say that that policy necessarily justifies or supports the proposal. It's more to cover that off, and it is relevant to do so, just to advise that there's no conflict with that policy. So the creation of this this new boundary treatment and gates set back into the site won't impact parking provision in a negative way. So that's the only reason that policy has been referenced there. Councillor Bennett mentioned the property opposite at number 30, and that's correct. I showed the previous planning permission that that site has, and then development has been undertaken, and it's not in accordance with those plans, and that retrospective application has been made, seeking a consideration on that. So in terms of the consideration from members here today, there's the 24 permission for that boundary treatment that is relevant in terms of the wider context, but the unauthorised work that has not yet been approved under that retrospective application is very much up for debate and consideration still. And in terms of that wider context, it's very much about just looking at the mix of boundary treatments and approaches that we would mention. Just a final point in terms of the differences between the withdrawn application and what we have proposed now. Town Councillor Bird mentioned this is very much that the changes are quite minimal in that way to allow for potentially more gaps through the slatted elements in between the railings, in between sections of the walls, and with the gate. And I think the applicant put that forward because they were trying to respond to some of that feedback around it being a very solid, consistent enclosure of that site frontage. So that's really where the change lies, but that's been picked up on in public speaking quite accurately.
Thank you, Joe. Do we have any final questions from the officers? Councillor Nibley.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that the distance of the gate from the footpath is such that vehicles would actually be blocking the pavement whilst the person's getting out of the vehicle to open the gates to gain access. Would it not be normal to actually ensure that you had a greater lots of traffic today? Is it not normal that the actual width between the pavement and the gate is such that you get a normal domestic saloon park there, or is this 5 meters sort of an arbitrary figure? Thank you. And what if it was a bigger vehicle? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nimney. I think in some instances, more historic arrangements, you just have gates that are pretty much hard up to the edge of the footway, and the only control that you might have in place then is to make sure those gates open inward rather than swinging out onto the highway. Any kind of modern proposal for boundary treatment and gates is a Highways Authority standard, not just in this county but across the country, that they have to be set a minimum of 5 meters into the site, and they reluctantly accept that in those instances where someone is pulling into the site, and these may well be electrified gates sliding across, and the actual time spent hovering over the footway is quite limited, and it's just a bit of a trade-off in terms of people coming in and out of their site. Ultimately, you also have the case, don't you, where if somebody's leaving their house and they're waiting to pull out onto the road, they might sit there for a couple of minutes, maybe not in this location, but in some whilst they're waiting to pull out into the highway. So you will always have that interaction. But what is one of the conditions on the recommendation here is in respect of those pedestrian visibility displays. So it's not just a case of looking at it in terms of visibility displays for motorists and those using the bike lane. It's also in respect of the the pavement and pedestrian usage there. So from our perspective, it's covered off in safety terms enough in that way. That's a minor inconvenience, no doubt.
Do we have any other questions? In that case, who would like to open the debate? Councillor Hedgley, I think you got your hand up first.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I must admit, when I looked at the drawings, etc., I thought it all looked rather garish, or to be more modern, it was in your face. I would almost expect an armed guard to be there, mafia style. I just don't think they suit the area at all. And as I say, they look a bit garish, just out of style. And I would say 11.1C is what I would vote against this application.
Thank you, Councillor Hedgley. Councillor Nim.
Yes, I'm very minded when I go to London. I tend to go to Cockfosters, and when you drive down that road, virtually every very expensive, nice property is now behind virtually a barricade, and it's quite intimidating. You don't actually see the housing. I think, as Councillor Bennett said, that particular postal district is one of the most secure and safe within our town. And I think this would be the start of fortification of High Road East, which is a bit bizarre for a seaside town. So I think the applicant really should rethink it and perhaps come back with something that's softer and more in keeping with the neighbourhood that they're currently living in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Daly.
Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm sort of on the garden fence with this one. What's important for me is that that there doesn't seem to be any significant changes to it really from the last time it was turned down. I know that in the officer's report, it does mention that it does markedly impact the street scene, so that's acceptable. And it also says in the report that, you know, after the last one was withdrawn and now this one submitted, officers obviously have been talking to the applicant. Applicant decided not to follow all the guidance proposed by officers, but apparently just enough, you know, for officers to recommend this one. So it all comes down to what it says in the report, that it's considered to comply with SCLP 11.2 and 1. So I think the thing for this committee is whether we consider that it does comply with those two planning rules or not. And I think that's what it's all about here today for us. Do we think it does comply? And I think what Councillor Nimney's just said there about this sort of feeling of fortification and the fact that this might be an example for others sort of swayed me a little bit, I think.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Deaton.
Yeah, thank you. I'm largely agree with what we've heard, and certainly I would agree with the issue about it looking fortified. It would really concern me that the impact of that would have on future developments along that particular street. I'm also actually quite bothered by the impact it might have on the adjoining property, which is the Old Hall, probably the oldest building in Felixstowe, I would think. I'm not 100% sure of that, but it's pretty ancient, and I think the overall development will have a detrimental effect on its vicinity. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Reeves.
I don't like the design. I think it is too jarring on the character. I mean, there are certain roads where you may get away with it. Marcus Road, for instance, which Felixstowe members will know. But here, I think it is out of character and should be refused.
Thank you. Well, we've only got one person that hasn't spoken.
I mean, apart from the fact that the pedestrian thing, the design, I think, well, there is a risk that it could potentially lead to a whole bunch of other people doing it. But we can't judge whether they will or they won't. So that to
No.
me isn't a planning issue really. As I said, I personally wouldn't want all that inconvenience, and I'm surprised they do. But it's the pedestrian bit which worries me really, about coming out and actually having to get out of the car, and if somebody's with a buggy or a wheelchair or something like that, that's actually a nuisance. That's rather than just being able to go straight into the in, you have to wait for them to faff about. That's the only thing really that worries me about this, because I don't think we can dictate really. If everyone else had beautiful hedging, then, and this was absolutely on its own, then I would say the same. But it's a hodgepodge down there. There isn't a single kind of way, and I can't even see the house, an old one, so it's completely barricaded anyway with trees and what have you. So you know, I don't know that it's going to affect that. So I'm afraid I'm going to say that I agree with the officers really.
Okay. So is that everyone has spoken? I think no one wants a second bite. So can I seek a proposer for the recommendation?
For the recommendation in the report.
This is for the recommendation in the report first. Councillor Smithson, you're proposing that? Yeah. Okay, fine. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yes, you now seek a new proposal.
So I need now to seek a new proposal. Councillor Nimney.
So is your microphone?
Sorry, I would suggest that we recommend refusal and we adopt the recommendation coming from Felixstowe Town Council, which is saying it's contrary to policy SCLP 11.1 ABC 3 and 4 and SCLP policy 11.2. Thank you. Looking for a seconder.
Yes, I look for a seconder. Councillor Hedgley, seconding. Thank you. So now I need a vote on that proposal, please. So that's, and those against? One. Okay, so that's carried by majority. Thank you very much. So I invite Councillor Bennett to return to the chair, please.
Thank you, John. Michelle? Item 7. So we move on to item 7, DC 260392, full car park, Deben swimming pool, Woodbridge, and Grant Heel is presenting. Over to you, Grant.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, item 7 on the agenda is for the proposed carport layout, which will effectively amount to 2 arrays of solar canopies within the car park of Deben swimming pool off Station Road in Woodbridge. Here we can see the site to the south of Station Road, and we can see the leisure centre building, the larger building within the centre of the screen there, and Woodbridge Community Hall just to the south outside of the site. We can see the existing car parking arrangement, which I understand provides 49 parking spaces all of which will be retained if the development were to be approved today. The two arrays of canopies would effectively occupy space over this row of parking spaces here and this row of parking spaces adjacent to the building. So it's this row adjacent or near to the party boundaries of properties, which are dwellings here accessible off Tanyard Close. There is a belt of trees which run along the boundary outside of the site, but within the rear gardens of these properties. And then obviously to the south of the site here, we've got additional parking. It's part of the wider leisure car park. And as I mentioned, we've got Station Road to the north from which the site is accessed, and then the swimming pool to the east. We can see here in the photos the looking eastward along the frontage of the main swimming pool building, and then in image 2 looking southward along the first along the position of the first array or solar canopy, if you will. That is the position of approximately 13 parking spaces, which would be enclosed by the canopy in this location in image 2. And then in image 1, we're looking southward again towards the row of a further 18 spaces that would be enclosed by another solar array canopy in this location. And you can see those houses that I mentioned earlier off Tanyard Close, back onto the site, and the trees and boundary treatments. You can see they're also in image 2, looking northward along the where the first row that I mentioned of canopies would be located over those 13 spaces. And then looking northward, set back in the site, looking northward towards the entrance off Station Road. We can see in the left of the image there, the parking space that would be enclosed by the canopies. And also, in fact, those towards the right of the image adjacent to the building. And again, another perspective in image 2, similar view. So here we can see the existing and proposed block plans. As I mentioned, the 2 rows that would enclose two rows of existing parking spaces. Towards the west of the site, 18 spaces enclosed, and to the east of the site, 13 spaces. Here's a section of the canopies themselves. So the canopies comprise a steel structure supported by posts set at approximately 5.5 meter centers. It does vary at various points throughout the development, but generally those are the centers that are being worked to. Like I say, they don't impact on the existing parking arrangements, so it will allow all of the spaces enclosed to be used. The canopies themselves, obviously, they support arrays of photovoltaic solar panels, which would generate energy, which would be fed back to the Deben swimming pool to support their energy needs. There would be batten lighting mounted on the underside of the canopies, obviously to illuminate the parking spaces in low daylight hours and during the evening hours. Approximately 3.7 meters to the rear at the highest point of these canopies, and dropping down to 2.8 meters at its lowest point, taking into consideration the panels on top of the canopy. So here we can see the result of the result of the development in the lower half of the screen compared to the existing arrangement. We just see that sort of relationship and that sort of scene between the site and the dwellings off Tanyard Close. And here we can see the other row and how that would appear against the existing arrangement, with the backdrop of the Stephen Leisure Centre there. So I will just add a little bit more context. The recommendation is one of approval. I would add that the solar panels themselves connect to inverters, which will be mounted on the canopy structures. Those inverters go into, as I understand it, go into a standby mode during low daylight hours and throughout the evening. So from a noise management perspective, there is a lower risk at those sort of quieter hours, as it were. We are, however, still imposing a condition which will require a noise assessment prior to the installation of that plant, and thereafter to monitor and make sure that the residents at Tanyard Close, who sit quite close to the site, aren't going to be unduly affected by the inverters. There is, as I understand it, all of the cables will be face mounted on the structure. However, there will be one trench dug from each of the canopy arrays in an easterly direction, obviously towards its final destination point at the Deben Leisure Centre building, obviously to serve their energy needs. And just picking up on that last condition there, so obviously we've got the standard 3-year timescale approved drawings condition. Removal of the canopies when no longer required, which is pretty standard at all consents for solar panels. And finally, a condition on limiting construction working hours. Again, as I understand it, the car park does operate 24/7. However, obviously the proximity of residents, we wanted to ensure that works wouldn't be undertaken at unsociable hours. But as I mentioned, the application is recommended for approval. And is it now for me to invite points of clarity? Or
no, we will go to public speaking.
No,
okay.
if you can ask if they've got any points of clarity
Oh,
on the presentation.
Oh, on the presentation. Yeah, okay. That's in me. Just factual clarity.
Yeah, you did say, I think, that the internal shelter was lit or would be lit, low volume. Is that sort of controlled by PIR, etc.? So it's not on when there isn't any activity in the car park. Just thinking of it coming, being on for the residents.
Yeah, no, I take your point. I believe they are on all the time. However, I think I don't want to put our leisure team officer Tim Snookus there. I don't want to put him on the spot, but he may be able to elaborate on that better than what I can.
I'll pass it to Nate Martin here, who is from Pulse Design Building.
So you're answering questions. Okay. Right. Well, we don't actually have any public speakers, so we can move on to just answering points of clarification. Yeah. Dave, if you can press the right button.
On the lights are suspended underneath the carport. They're on a daylight sensor, so as the dust falls, and then they'll be on a time, so they'll stay on till say 10:30 when the leisure centre's closed, and then they'll go off. So they wouldn't be on from dusk till dawn, they'd be on from dusk until the leisure centre closed.
Just wondering whether they could be PIR controlled, so they'd only actually be on at all when there was activity within the car park.
There is possibility of putting them on the PIR as well, if that's what needs it to be. Can be changed to a PIR sensor.
Thank you.
Any other points of clarification? Yep. Councillor Hedgley?
I trust that there's not going to be an extra car parking charge for people putting their cars under there. But seriously, have there been there's no objections from anyone, any of the dwellings on the other side?
Yeah, so we've received no comments at all from residents, no.
No other questions to the officers or guest officers? No. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Nimi, you do have another question?
Well, if we're to general submission that we haven't had from the officers, I wanted to have some.
So the officers aren't speaking. This is the officers.
Okay.
Moment.
Well, I just sort of
questions.
I didn't know whether we had any idea of the payback time for this installation, and that it will be hopefully generating funding for the pool and eventually would move into profit. So do we have any timescale for that?
Thank you. This was grant funded through the or 50% grant funded through the government decarbonisation public sector building funding that we were successful in for 3 of our leisure centres. So it's grant funded, but it is there to take it from gas to electric that we're moving to decarbonise, and the amount of solar panels is the bit that keeps our costs so they don't increase from going from gas to electric going forward. Repayment time, as I said, we haven't, because it's grant, we haven't done that.
Then the repayment time on that scheme for the canopies, with it being grant funded, should be about 3 years for that to be repaid, and then you'd be in profit.
Thank you very much. Helps the decision.
I had a question. Is this our first foray into such facilities?
It is, yes. It's the first one that we've done. We have done some feasibility studies about doing further ones, depending on how this goes going forward, and working with our car parks to see as we go forward.
Because I think on the continent they're very common, aren't they? So actually quite an important innovation to test the water and see how it goes. Would you? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Dave. Thanks very much for your time. We're now going to move. I don't think there's any other questions for officers here. So members will debate this item. Councillor Daly, that's.
Yeah, perhaps I should have identified an interest in this, as I'm cabinet member for energy and climate change. But yeah, I think this is essential stuff. As has just been talked about slightly, it's the beginnings of bigger plans. Yes, we've got to follow our decarbonisation agenda. We've got to do it. This is part of that. So there's been no objection to them. It's going to be a positive in all sorts of ways in terms of carbon reduction, but also, it helps us economically as well in terms of running our leisure centres in that proper way, because the two things do dovetail, cost and carbon. So I would recommend everybody to support this.
Yeah, one question which actually someone else mentioned to me was about security. Sorry if I missed the boat here. Does this in any way compromise or can raise any concerns about security visibility of people going into getting to their cars at night time or whatever? Does it reduce visibility? Sorry to bring you back. That's out of line. It just occurred to me.
the carports are fully open, so although they've got the canopy over the top, there is a sectional and they don't bus in together. There's a 25 to 40 mil gap in between each one, and there is clear visibility from the car park into the parking bays. And I changed the lights to a PIR system. As someone approaches the cars, the lights will come on. So I can change it from to a PIR system. So, but you have got clear visibility from all of the car park.
Right, thank you.
There's no enclosed sides or rear of the car park. Their carport.
Thank you. Tim?
Just to say, we did meet with Woodbridge Town Council to answer, because they asked more about it. So we went through all of the questions that they had on about security and all of these aspects as well. So we did talk about that. They are completely open so that you can see them, so that you'll be able to see people getting in and out. It won't create any of that. And we believe the height of them is enough to stop people climbing on them as well. So we've had all those discussions to make sure they're as safe and as open as possible.
Thank you. So, Councillor Daly, is that a proposal from?
Yes, I'd like to propose we accept the application as officers have recommended.
Councillor Deakin?
I'm more than happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Deakin. In that case, members, let's vote on approval of that proposal. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you, members. That brings us to the end of today's agenda. Thank you all for being here, and we're going to do that once we're switched off. Yeah, we're just waiting for the broadcast to end, and I've got a few more words to say here. So we've now concluded the business on the agenda. I'd like to thank everyone who has participated today and ask the meeting host to end the live feed. Please keep microphones muted until the meeting host has confirmed